All righty. All right, let's put in the chat one word. How are you feeling right now? One word. How are you feeling right now? Anxious. Okay. Happy. That's all right. What else? I know sometimes we are anxious. Curious. Ready. Okay. Let's rock and roll. Sick. Oh, I'm sorry. Feel better, Kelly. Being sick is the worst. All right. So let's rock and roll. No, is this the right one? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, for those of you who are here for Mariana yesterday, how amazing is she? Like incredible, right? Just like so full of energy. Any insights come out after seeing, and for people who weren't here yesterday, we had Mariana Diaz-Kraus of Movilizatorio talk about creating change. Any insights come out for anyone, and you can feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. Any insights come out for anyone after her session, just like when you were kind of thinking about it yesterday? Any reflections? Anyone have any reflections from yesterday? Interesting to hear how the culture affected their ability to get things done. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that we're working on at Empower Global is a cross-cultural leadership course or cross-cultural teamwork course, because when I used to teach DEI, I noticed that I would walk into sometimes a room to teach a DEI training and realize that the issue was not actually race, gender, age. The issue was that the French didn't understand the Spaniards and the Spaniards didn't understand the Jamaicans. And then there's obviously, gender components of being a woman in these different countries that's added on to the cross-cultural consideration piece of it. So that's why we're designing a cross-cultural course that will license to companies and global organizations to be able to train their teams on how do you navigate cultures, borders, because we're a globalized world now. Figuring out step two. I was thinking about that a lot today too, Beth. She talked about how, often we get amplified or we get excited about creating change, but then we don't, we'll go to a protest or whatever it is, and then we don't think about what's step two. What's the next thing that we can do? And today we're going to talk about that a little bit, about that step two, and have more inspiration from our special guest, Lesley Richards. So before we get started, on today's topic, I just want to remind you that the Women's Leadership Challenge, like I said, is officially open for enrollment for our February 2025 cohorts. And that is going to be there's one cohort in DC that meets in person, and then there's one cohort that's virtual that meets after work. Sorry, my screen froze for a second. There's one that meets after work virtually. Like I mentioned, it is only for women who already have some leadership experience. This is not an entry-level course, as you can see by the caliber of women that you've heard speak so far, who are all like pretty high level. Sorry, my screen. Let me just Sorry about that. My second screen disconnected for a second. Why is this not working? Can you see my screen or no? Keep saying
that you're sharing, so it looks like there's just a little bit of a lag time in the visual coming up.
Maybe that's why I keep saying your screen sharing is paused. It's weird. This never happens. Okay, well, whatever. So the Women's Leadership Challenge, like I said, is officially open for enrollment. If you have gotten enough from the series and feel like you're ready to go, I totally applaud you and I still want to support you. But if you feel like you want a proven blueprint surrounded by other amazing women who can help you through this, one thing about change that's important to realize is that, like we said yesterday, change takes time, and that's also personally. And so what I really like about the Women's Leadership Challenge is being able to help women to actually really change because it takes place over a whole year. So if you come into class and you say, I had one woman who said, I really want to be an adjunct professor on national security. And that was one class. And so the next class she comes back and I said, hey, Laura, what happened? Did you apply for that national security adjunct position? She's like, oh, well, I still have these reservations. Next class. Okay, I did my application. Can you all take a look at my video application? Okay, we took a look at the video. Next class. Laura, did you apply? Yes, I applied. Next class. I am now a national security adjunct professor at Duke University. And she's been teaching for 3 years. So, sometimes you just need that accountability and that kick in the butt. And, other women to encourage you to go after things. I've had other women who wanted to apply for fellowships, but I don't know, am I qualified? Am I good enough? And I've seen women, apply for it, get coaching from other women in their cohort on interviewing for the fellowship who have insight into that fellowship because they've done it before or they've experience in that field. That's the value of the community. I've also helped a lot of women with salary negotiations. So women who come into the course and are worried about the money, I've helped women negotiate anywhere from $5,000 more to $75,000 more in their either salaries or in their board positions, in their board seats. So if money is an issue for you, just to be aware of, I help a lot of women with salary negotiations because that's important because we need to ask for more, but we have to do it strategically. So if you are interested in the Women's Leadership Challenge and you want to talk more about it, you can book a time on my calendar. I'll put the link in the chat. Okay, let's move merrily along. If you are new to us, please put your name and your organization and your LinkedIn in the chat so that people can connect with you. If you've already been here, no need to do that again, because we do need to create a network of women that rivals the old boys club, but is way more ethical and cooler and doesn't just exist on the golf course. I do like golf, but still. Okay, so let's keep rolling. Let's see if my screen will now share. Now I think I'm going to share my whole desktop. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I know most of you do, but I'm an international speaker, leadership trainer. I've probably trained over 10,000 people, leaders at this point from 48 countries on everything from how to navigate change to resilience to leading multicultural teams. I also give a lot of talks. I know Women's History is coming, Women's History Month is coming up. If you're booking speakers for your ERG or BRG, I do a lot of speaking for Women's History Month, and my calendar is already booking up there. I'm working on three books, one on feminist leadership, one on creating change, and one on your intrinsic power map, which were all things that we talked about. I gave a TEDx, I had a fellowship at Bellagio, at the Rockefeller Foundation, and I host a podcast called Samanthropolitics, which gives a feminist lens to foreign policy. And I mentioned I was published in New Lines Magazine yesterday. I forgot to put the link in the chat. So today I will put the link in the chat about that article about democracy and protecting against abrogations to democracy in the next 4 years. So that's a little bit about me. And as I mentioned, the company I run is called Empower Global. We do full-scale leadership diagnostics, leadership consulting, leadership accelerators. If you want to develop your leaders and you have no idea how to do it, come to us, we'll figure it out. We also run customized women's leadership accelerators for companies on a variety of topics based on what is needed in your workplace. Some of our clients. Okay, so yesterday we talked about leading change and what does change entail? We talked about this. So we didn't talk about yet what our change model is. Change model is at Empower. So as I mentioned yesterday, I used to work with a lot of human rights activists and activists at Ashoka and really learn from them, what does it take to create change? And all of these different creative ways to create change that exist in the world, that some of them that don't exist yet, right? As we talked about yesterday, Mariana talked about the future newspaper and creating that future state, which was really, I think, interesting for a lot of people. I love that example. After working with all these activists and then also doing a lot of workshops, both in the corporate space and the government space and nonprofit space on creating change, this is our change model of the things and the steps that you need to do in order to really foster change. So the first thing is you have to really provide that clear vision. What is the destination that you're pointing people to? If you have too much ambiguity in that destination, or you're not pointing people anywhere, they have nowhere to go. So I'm obviously flying through these because of time's sake. In the Women's Leadership Challenge, we have 2 whole classes on change, and we go through each of these in like serious painstaking detail. Then we have to figure out, this is a really important point for change. It's called WIIFT. What's in it for them? What's in it for them? And this is with your personal life too. Whenever you're making an argument, whether it's a salary negotiation or whether a company should increase their maternal, let's say their parental benefits, right? You always have to think about what is in it for whoever the party is that you're talking to. If you're talking about maternity leave, will it actually increase retention of employees because they're more likely to stay when they come back? Will it increase recruitment of employees because they're going to be more attracted to a company with benefits? If you're arguing for a salary negotiation or a salary increase, how is it going to benefit your team for you to be able to have more resources or to be higher paid or to have a higher title? Is having that higher title actually going to give you more legitimacy in a room with a bunch of men who think that you're the note taker half the time, right? Because your title is senior manager instead of director or deputy chief of party or whatever that is. So thinking about what is in it for them is so critical in all of our negotiations. The third piece is emotions and logic. So emotions is about, ultimately, I believe that to get people to change, you have to get to people's emotions. Most stuff is logic based. But if you think about any commercial you've ever seen, it's not, here's a PowerPoint presentation on why you should buy a Jeep Grand Cherokee. It is less expensive than the competition. It has 4-wheel drive. It's like a beautiful couple in Hawaii that are on a beach, like driving down with, martinis or whatever, because it's supposed to get you to feel that emotion of, oh, I'm going to experience this. And going back to the future state, if you buy a Jeep, you will be a beautiful couple in Hawaii. Doesn't, have any correlation, but when you trigger emotion, you don't need logic, that, you're going to experience this and you're having that emotion of inspiration, and, oh, I could be this couple. I feel so happy right now. I'm going to go buy a Jeep. And yet often we always try to target logic. I think the best solution is emotions backed by logic. So you target someone's emotion and then you kick in the logic. There's a book by Chip and Dan Heath called, I can't remember right now, it's something change. And they call emotions the rider, sorry, they call emotions the elephant and logic the rider, because who's bigger of those two? Obviously the elephant, which is the emotions. Okay, the next thing is you want to create a clear path for people. You want to give them, what is the yellow brick road? I went rock climbing with this awesome lady, Judy Bratt. She has these GovCon rockstar things at rock climbing, and I was terrified. And I climbed the first wall, and then we got to these huge walls. Something I didn't realize with rock climbing is they actually provide you a path for your course. So if you're going up the yellow, you just are reaching for the yellow. If you're going up the green, you're just reaching for the green. And they've architected that path so that it helps you to get to the top versus just grabbing onto random ledges to get to the top. And so that's the same thing for our teams, or when we're leading or creating a social change movement, is like Mariana was saying, what is step 2? Helping them figure out what is step 2. What is step 3? Why is that the logic? Why do you go in that order of, step to step? The next piece that's really important is giving people work according to their strengths. So when we think about assigning people work according to their strengths, we really want to make sure that, if somebody is really great at Excel, they're doing Excel. And if somebody's really great at public speaking, they're doing public speaking, not that those are reversed. Because again, you soar in the areas where you're strong, and it's going to take a lot more time. Not that you shouldn't learn Excel, and I have painstakingly learned how to at least, multiply 2 columns, which was painful, but that's never going to be my strength. And if you gave me that job, I'm not going to excel. The next piece that we're going to talk about is change champions. And then I'm actually going to go into more details on these 2 things. So I'm going to skip bright spots also. Realizing that change is messy, whether it's personal change or whether it's your, societal change. Change is messy. It's not clear cut. You're going to mess up. It's not going to go according to plan all the time. And you have to embrace the mess and realize that that mess is part of the process and it's okay. And then Mariana pointed out, you have to really reward yourself and others along the way, right? So when you have those small wins, again, this applies personally and societally. Societally, okay, we got signatories on this bill, even though it hasn't been passed yet. That's a win. Obviously, the bill passing is a win. In your personal life, if you are, like we just talked about with that example with Laura, getting just, doing the application is a win. Doing the video part of it is a win. Getting that review is a win. Obviously, the ultimate goal is getting that job, but it takes time to get to that point. And you have to kind of reinforce yourself with those pats on the back along the way. And then I spoke about your resilience arsenal, that change is hard, it's tough, it takes time, and you need to make sure that you are your most resilient, strongest self to be able to get through it. Okay, that was very quick. Again, in the Women's Leadership Challenge, we dive very deeply into these and have you kind of wrestle with all of them so that you can apply the learning for each. Okay, so I want to introduce you to 2 concepts in change that are in the Women's Leadership Challenge that are 2 of my favorite concepts, so I can give you something here. Change champions. Okay, so change champions in every change movement I've talked to, when I've talked to activists, it's really important to understand who your change champions are. And those are the people that are going to help you drive the change that you're trying to make. So on the top right, where it says high alignment with issues and powerful, those are what one speaker referred to as their fairy godmothers. Another said the red team. Those are people that are really in alignment with whatever the issue it is that you care about, and they have power. Those people, you want to do a couple things. 1, you want to get them on the record saying that they align with your issue. 2, you want to equip them with their talking points. So if you're giving them talking points on maternity leave or healthcare, they have all of the statistics ready. They have everything ready to go to be able to understand, or to be able to walk into a press conference and say, here are the 5 points that I need to put out. So they need to be prepped. They don't want to have to go do the research on their own. They want you to give them whatever obstacles might come and say, you might encounter this person pushing back and say, well, we can't increase parental leave because it's too expensive. Well, actually, here's the economic argument. It's at your fingertips. So you want to also equip them. Your bottom right is high alignment with issues, but they don't necessarily have power. That's your grassroots activators. So those are the people that, like Mariana was saying, submit the online petitions. They're the ones who are signing things. They're showing up to the protests. They're getting together in the focus groups to give their opinion. They're forming your online base and presence. Those are people that are forming your grassroots base. And like I always say, change happens from the top down and the bottom up. And when you have both, that's when you really get real change. The top left are people you have to be aware of and anticipate. Those are the ones, like I said, the person who says, well, we can't do more parental leave because it's too expensive, right? They don't align with your issue, but they have power. You have to be able to anticipate those obstacles, figure out what argument might win them over to your side, or at least make them feel like it's good enough. The bottom left, and I feel like especially in the social media landscape of our kind of myopic systems, We often pay way too much attention to these people. So the people that don't have alignment with you and they don't have power, just ignore them. And I know that can be hard sometimes, but those are not your change champions. And I feel like we spend far too much time trying to activate those people, and it's often a waste of time. I'm going to stop my share for a second. Uh, for example, when I used to do diversity and inclusion training, I used to have, would have maybe 2 resistant people. And when I first started doing training, I focused on how do I convince these people, that DEI works? And what I realized was that that was a waste of my time, because there were, of the 2 resistant people, there was 10 people that really wanted to learn how to be champions for this and drive change in their workplace. And they were the ones that were really going to make the change. Convincing those 2 people wasn't really going to create change. It was helping those others expand their impact that was going to create the most change. That was a big learning for me in doing DEI training. The next concept I want to teach you about before we bring Lesley in is called bright spots. This is another one of my favorite concepts. And again, this is something that you can apply on a personal level and on a societal level. So bright spots, typically when we look at a problem, we think about, so I'll give you an example, and this is a real story. They were looking at a malnourished village in Vietnam. And typically you might look at that as a researcher and say, okay, what is the reason behind all these kids being malnourished? Let's do a study, let's do focus groups, let's look at all the malnourished kids and figure out what's going on. Well, actually, in that circumstance, what they did instead was they said, who are the kids who are not malnourished? Why are they not malnourished? And then they're in the same socioeconomic class, they're in the same village. Why are they not malnourished? So that's called bright spots. And what they found out in this example was that those kids, actually, their mothers were putting protein into every single one of their meals. So instead of having a lot of shrimp in the last meal of the day, they were putting shrimp in every meal. And they were giving their kids 5 meals instead of 3. Very basic stuff. So they realized we actually don't need to go in and deliver all this humanitarian aid. We just need to help people understand that this is how they can nourish their children. So then what did they do? They employed those moms as their change champions to be the ones to hold workshops with other moms and dads, but in this case was mostly moms, to teach them how to feed their children in a way that would nourish them. In your personal life, from a bright spots example, I use this as a coach. So you might come to me, and I had someone say to me the other day, I always lose my keys. And as a coach, I say, never say always and never say never, because it's not true. And I said to my coachee, I said, well, where are you right now? She said, well, I'm in my apartment. I said, well, how are you in your apartment if you lost your keys? She goes, oh, well, I didn't lose my keys today. I said, but I thought you always lose your keys. So then we started to drill down. Okay, even if say you lose your keys 5 out of 10 times, what happens in the other half? What happens in the 3 times that you don't lose your keys? What are the circumstances that surround that enable you to remember your keys? Maybe it's that you had a hook on the door. Maybe it's that you had a beeper on your keys at that time. Maybe it's that you, whatever that is. But then you get them to focus on what are the times when you're able to do this thing. And this can apply to anything: exercising in the morning, being on time, eating right. I mean, any sort of personal change that you want to make, this can apply to that. It's like looking at the circumstances when you are able to do that and figuring out how do you replicate those circumstances. So that's the second piece with it, which is bright spots. Any reflections so far? That was a lot of information. Any reflections or takeaways so far before I bring Lesley in? Yeah, I see Julia. Julia, would love to hear some of your reflections, and then Marcia.
I think when you were speaking about your New Lines article, it's just a really strong example of if we look at Samantha as one person, and then we look at all of these big businesses, and we realize while power as a construct and the way that many of our businesses construct power, might be, let's say, power based on position. If Samantha's using her thought leadership as power and then playing with the power structure shifts. So I believe that if we look at something like power and we look at our roles as actors and the way that we can take that um, change model that Sam showed and really think about how we can use the unique powers that differentiate us. I think that's when we all can start to really harness both our power and our alignment with issues to create that societal impact. And it shows us that playing with what power means to us holds a lot of, I think, creative potential. So that's what came through to me when I was looking at the first visual. And then with the second, bright spots, I have more to say on that. I think especially when we look at our own stories and we look at points in our stories where things worked out really well and potentially we can say, wow, I was self-actualized in that moment. So look at, okay, how is that possible? And focus on that, especially if we are in the midst of a moment where it's hard to see the light or feel the hope. I feel like that's where we can often source inspiration from within. And that's something that definitely matters, especially if you're standing alone and you feel as though you aren't really seeing the progress externally.
Yeah, beautifully said, Julia. And I think that first point is important too, is to recognize, that goes back to feminist leadership, start where you stand. What are your strengths? And again, this now you're seeing my science teachers say the method behind my madness of the Women's Leadership Challenge of getting people to understand their strengths and their power before they get to the change piece. Because you have to understand, like, where are your strengths? Are you a writer, right? I'm a writer. So I was like, I'm going to write an article. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not an artist. But somebody out there like Vanessa, who's in the next cohort of the Women's Leadership Challenge coming up, is a filmmaker. She just did a film on the first female president of Taiwan. That's her medium to create change. And we all have those different mediums and things that we're good at. And that's where we should exercise ourselves when it comes to creating that change. If you're not a great public speaker, don't go public speak about it. Write an article, right? Like there's different, utilize your strengths. And it doesn't mean you can't get better on other aspects, but figuring out what your strengths are is really important. And then let's hear from Marcia and then we'll move on. And hi, Marcia, good to see you here.
Hi, yeah, I didn't really need to pipe up here. Sorry. I'm just delighted to have a chance to participate a little bit and to listen in. And it's more for me, reflecting back on things that we've done. For example, back in 1995, when Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright promised we would do better on paying attention to women's participation in our international development work, nobody at USAID knew how to do it. And so we had to go around trying to change people's thinking about whether women should participate or not. And just as you have illustrated there, we learned the hard way not to bother with the people who were the naysayers, the men who just absolutely were not interested. Find some of the women with power who did understand, even if they were leery about sticking their necks out. But they were, and so I was always, for example, there was a woman, a Fletcher alumna, who was an upper level position. I discovered her in the Bureau of Europe and East Asia, and she became an ally. So I used my Fletcher relationship with her to get her interest. She was not interested in promoting women per se, but it all made sense what I was saying to her. And the last example would be when I was doing some work with the World Food Program, and they were trying to increase use of enriched food for lactating women. They were having trouble getting women to be able to use it consistently. And what we discovered in the appreciative inquiry of this sort of the different situation was I walked in one time and noticed that there were two parents standing there weighing the baby, not the woman alone, but with her husband. And so then we started talking about how important it was for women that their husbands understand why this was important, rather than they're coming home with extra food when the man was hungry because he'd been out doing physical labor. And so they needed to engage the men, not just the women, in these efforts that were targeting women, but needed to involve the men. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts just came to mind. But Another time, in another moment, I'll talk about community organizing here in Southern Maryland and knowing what your destination is. We've been working to get a community center, which became a YMCA, and that's been involved. Finding our allies, knowing what the destination is, riding the problems and the messes which came up, and making our way. And it's been 7 years, but on November 12th, they finally broke ground for a YMCA. So I'd be happy to offer up other examples, but I don't want to hijack any of this. I'm just delighted to participate. Thank you, Samantha, and good luck to everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. Marcia is a consummate change maker, and she's been very supportive of me. So thank you for sharing my article and just being, just awesome. The Fletcher Network is good and strong. Okay, so on that note, let's bring in our guest for today. Lesley is also an alumni of the Women's Leadership Challenge. She's a democracy and governance professional with over 15 years of experience in electoral processes, rule of law, governance, civil society, and human rights. She has a proven track record in designing, implementing, and managing initiatives that promote best practices in electoral processes, institutional strengthening, capacity development, and civil society engagement, particularly with marginalized populations in post-conflict countries. Until this past December, Lesley was the Deputy Chief of Party for Democracy International's Strengthening Political Landscape program in Bangladesh, a role she held for 5 years. She's conducted numerous assessments to evaluate the overall capacity of election management bodies. Lesley's work on gender and persons with disabilities includes developing platforms for advancing strategies among civil society organizations and government institutions to promote the rights of women and persons with disabilities. Lesley, I'm happy to bring you in to talk a little bit about change in your experience.
Okay, thank you so much, Samantha, and thanks for inviting me to this amazing panel of women. I am quite honored. So you've already, given my bio. So I think I'll talk on 2 projects. I'll try and be quite brief, because I work in electoral processes. So that's working not only with the election management bodies in various different countries, but also with political parties. And with the 2 projects that I worked on most recently in my career, the last one being in Bangladesh, we worked with, it was USAID funded and FCDO funded, and we worked with the 3 main political parties in Bangladesh. So the ruling party and the 2 opposition parties. So what we tried to do was, in terms of not strengthening the internal democratic practices within the 3 political parties, but we also tried to expand political space so political parties could operate and function freely within the country. Because oftentimes political space shrinks and opposition parties are sometimes unable to, conduct a regular, like have regular meetings or program activities. So one of the most important components of the project was, of course, the inclusion of women in the formal political process. So some of the initiatives that we did that were quite successful, for example, we firstly developed a wide network, because what often happens in development projects, assistance projects, is there's a lack of intersectionality. So projects tend to often concentrate on women in the capital and not minorities in, rural areas. So we developed a multi-party, it's very important we work the 3 parts, so a multi-party network of over 20,000 women leaders, across the country to help the political parties to include women in decision-making positions in mainstream leadership committees within the political parties. Also, is what we did is that we, and that was found very instrumental in having these women sort of advocate. So for example, is what we did. We also promoted women's political leadership and gave them tools to advocate, and how that was very important. One of the provisions in the Bangladesh's legal framework, legal framework, each political party, they should have had 33% women, and it was supposed to be by 2020. Within their party structure, 33% women, and none of the political parties had achieved that. And this is during the midst of COVID. The Electoral Commission tried to overturn that. They tried to eliminate that provision, and it was kind of done in the middle of the night. You know, they tried to do it, you know, COVID, not everybody was kind of social distancing. So the woman got a hold, they heard that, they were able to hear that. And then they did a very targeted advocacy initiative online, making calls. And because of their initiatives, they were able to prevent the that provision from being repealed. I mean, it was what they did though was that there is no now deadline, but it wasn't taken out. So that is good from the legal framework. Also is what we did, and this is where you're talking about where we encouraged women to serve on, you know, campaigns. I'm sorry, to, you know, be leaders in the political party committees. And oftentimes you find you have to watch your language, because what we would say, and you even find CNN doing that, where, you know, we would say, oh, you know, we're trying to get eligible or qualified women in political, as in leadership positions in political parties. But no, you just say potential women, because you wouldn't say qualified men. And the women are just as qualified or underqualified as the men. Because I remember once CNN, they said something when it was a Nobel Peace Prize or the Science Prize, and they said, woman scientist won. If it was a male, they would have just said, you know, a scientist won, you know, whatever, John Brown won the Nobel Peace Prize. We also, what is very important is that
Lesley, so what was the terminology you used? You just, could you say that one more time?
In terms of, so we said potential woman rather than eligible woman. You know, this is, you know, so what we would do is that when the political parties were forming their committees, we would provide a list of women so they could be included in political parties. Because oftentimes political parties, and even in corporate America, or, you know, corporate organizations, say, well, we don't have any qualified women, so we can't, that's why we don't have women in leadership positions. So we're like, okay, here's a list of, you know, of women. But even what I'm saying is when we are articulating it ourselves, you know, and writing reports, we were saying provide a list of qualified women. There's no need to have that qualified woman. You know, if you're going to present a list, they're qualified. You never say qualified men. Here's a list of men, potential men that can be included in your party committee. So we said, here's a list of potential women that can be included in your party committee and leadership positions. So also what we did, and maybe to answer some of what, you know, some of the framework that, you know, Samantha was talking about. The first one is what's in it for them. And, you know, you always have to realize, because I'll give you an example. We had a workshop and we had invited a minister, a very high level minister from the, you know, ruling party. So whenever we have these workshops, we were trying to, you know, encouraging, you know, women's inclusion and women's representation. And then he made a comment and everybody laughed. He said, hey, listen, we are all for, and this is leading up to the elections. He said, I'm all for women's equality, but we also need to win seats. We also need to win the elections, because we were trying to encourage him to include women in general seats, because in Bangladesh, they have reserved seats for women, but we also want to encourage women to also to be candidates for general seats and not just the reserved seats. Yeah, so therefore you have to, you're going to meet people like this all the time. So you have to say what's in it for them. And then, you know, you have to give an argument, counter that argument and say, you know, more than 50% of the population in Bangladesh is women. And, you know, so therefore you want to appeal to women. You want to have, you know, in your political campaign, you want to have women's concerns. And, you know, we actually did that where we collected concerns, citizens' concerns from the population all over Bangladesh, and, you know, gave it to the, you know, to political parties. And actually 3 of our concerns, which was put into their party manifesto. And that, you know, that doesn't seem like a lot, 3, but that's a lot for a political party putting their political manifesto. And all of these concerns, you know, were about women and youth. Also, another thing is what I want to, is when you said to create a clear path, what we actually did was that we did 2 things. We helped women put together a career path for them. Okay, this is how you're going to attain, you know, leadership position within your party. And we provided training, leadership training, capacity development training, public speaking training, and also branding, because women, we don't sell ourselves. You know, Samantha also alluded to that, you know, where we tend to be modest. That's how we were raised. So we said, no, you've got to brand yourself and put yourself out there. And then also when you are talking about what is very important when you are doing these gender programs, often, yes, you concentrate on the woman, you also have to concentrate on the men. And so what we also did is that we had these, what we call them, male champions, male allies. So we targeted certain men that were progressive. And because unfortunately, men listen to men, so we had these male allies, these male champions that we call them, and they would always be the voice of reasoning in meetings and say, hey, no, we make sure that there's women inclusion in, the political party. Why don't we have more women in leadership roles? So I think, that is also, important. So we did a lot, we did a lot of that. And then also is what I think is also very important is that we also, in terms of advocacy. So we actually advocated with the Speaker of the House for a private members bill. And this was to have a bill, a law within the legal framework for funding women candidates. Because oftentimes when we had done a study, and one of the reasons other than, society and other reasons why women do not attain to the general seats is because of lack of funding. So this is one way to encourage women to be in the, to run for general seats. So also is what we did was in terms of also within the political parties is what we did is we conducted workshops, and this is also in terms of creating a clear path. So not only did we create a clear path, a career path for women to become candidates, but we also conducted workshops with political parties to develop a roadmap for achieving that 33% quota. And so we, it's all good to have a roadmap and they never follow it, but these roadmaps included regular monitoring tools to make sure and, provided responsibilities to various different people in the parties to make sure that, this monitoring tool was your assigned task of various different people. So to make sure that they were held accountable and monitoring, okay, where are we here today on what have we done this and this? This is a roadmap. Okay, you're responsible for doing this. Have you achieved this task? So this helped to make sure that the tasks were being executed and targets were being met. Also, most importantly, I think what we did was we created these, what we called study circles. And basically what it was is because, in politics by nature is it's divisive because it's, you're going to vote for me, you want citizens to vote for you, your constituents, vote for party A rather than party B. So we developed study circles for women leaders. And within these study circles, they, to discuss various different issues and challenges for women and, to generate ideas amongst women. It was a multi-party platform, women from the three different political parties that we worked for. But these study circles not only brought women together from various different political parties and exchange ideas how to advance, gender equality and women's representation and inclusion within political parties, but it also fostered a culture of tolerance and cooperation by finding, we had discussions on tolerance and diversity of perspectives. And, you can't, that's a very important component especially in politics. So you have these women coming together from different political parties and just within these workshops where they were like, okay, we may see things differently, but we have the same goal. Everybody has the same goal. They want Bangladesh to advance. How, your path to advance in Bangladesh may be different, but you have the same objective. So we have the same end game, and we are having the same challenges within our respective parties. So I thought, that we found very useful in terms of the study circles. And I want to sort of very briefly then mention just with Haiti. So in Haiti, what we did was that we developed, and this was a multi-institutional framework where we worked with the election management body and also the Ministry of Women's Affairs. And we developed a national gender strategy and election strategy. So this was a comprehensive strategy in the lead up to, for the whole electoral cycle. Because the electoral cycle, everybody thinks electoral cycle is election day when people go and vote or what have you. But the election cycle starts 9 months, a year to 9 months before the actual E-Day, election day, voting day. So this strategy had several different components. There was and what was very good about this strategy, once again, intersectionality is important and getting various different voices. So in each of these, we had what you call these workshops in the different, like states or provinces of Haiti. So we had a member of the election management body and a member of the Ministry of Women's Affairs. So they would come with us to the various different areas in Haiti. And then we would invite a diverse cross-section of an audience, from police to civil society organizations, for them to share their perspectives. So we got a very holistic, inclusive view or diverse view of opinions. So from this is what we realized there were, sort of 7 specific objectives. One was, of course, the legal framework. How does one adopt an inclusive legal framework, within international law and within the Constitution. And one thing that we did with the legal framework actually was in Haiti, when we realized, so we followed all of these recommendations. So for example, what we realized was when the election results were announced, of course, you have the opportunity to contest the results. And oftentimes we found that when they were contested, oftentimes it was simple things. And because of lack of knowledge of the legal system, oftentimes a woman it was more prevalent for women, for them to lose their seats than men. So what we did is we had a partnership with the Haitian Bar Association, and they engaged, and this was great, they engaged 16 lawyers, and is what these lawyers did. So when it came to the elections, is what we did is, and this was at the CASEC, so this is sort of local elections. And so is what we did was that these lawyers help the women to to adjudicate their complaints. And sometimes it was something just as simple as, okay, they forgot to put the registration number or something like that. So that we found to be quite useful. We also had a with the election management body is that we had establishing a roadmap for the election management body in Haiti to engage and promote women's participation in the electoral process. And from that, what we did, and they developed actually a women's unit within the election management body. So they always ensured there was, everything was sort of, gender specific and the legal framework. And one of the recommendations, something as simple as disaggregating the electoral results by gender. So, so a lot of times people think that change has to be something monumental and big, but just something as simple as disaggregating election results, that's, a small step in the right direction. What we also did is in terms of civic education, in terms of voting, whenever we did the radio spots or spots on TV or even in social media, we always made sure that there was a woman, like if somebody was giving information, like providing information on, election day, it was always a woman. If we were showing, okay, this is a winner, this person won the elections, it was always a woman. So just simple things like that, that people don't realize that when it's civic education spot, oftentimes it might always be a man speaking. So we had also women speaking. We also had persons with disabilities speaking, and all of our campaign posters, the civic education posters always had women in leadership positions and also persons with decision-making. Also then, I'm going to sort of not go over all the 7 objectives, but one that was important is also the media. And we provided, and we did this also in Bangladesh, is provide gender-sensitive training for journalists. And, something as simple as what we noticed, for example, when they were presenting in the newspaper, in Haiti, they were presenting a male candidate and a woman candidate. They were competing against each other. And the male candidate, they spoke about his career, what he has done. And the female candidate, they first started off talking about her hair and her style of dress and this and that, and whose wife she was, and then finally got to her career and her accomplishments. So this was, sort of gender sensitive training and, how you portray women in leadership positions, also what's important, even with something as simple as natural disasters or anything, that to make sure that when, as a reporter, when you're reporting, that your sources are also women and, you know, other ethnic or religious minorities. So, you know, so I think I will stop right there. Oh, well, actually, the last thing, sorry, in sort of, you know, in certain contexts is a huge thing is, and this is, you know, sort of a global thing, is, you know, violence against women. That was a main thing, violence against women. And this is not only against candidates, but also against the poll working agents and also voters. So what we did was, you know, to encourage political parties to provide, you know, protection for women. But one thing that we did was that we partnered together with an organization. So we developed a hotline on election day. And so if you, as a woman, if you had any problem or violence or something, you could call into this hotline. And this was with, once again, it was with the Ministry of Women's Affairs, with the election management body, where the hotline was actually right in the election management body. And they had access to the Haitian National Police. And we partnered with an organization that, okay, they worked on AIDS. However, they were very used to triaging calls. So we just provided training to this organization on electoral violence and developed this hotline that was widely disseminated across Haiti for, you know, women candidates, you know, women poll workers, and also women voters. So I think I'll stop right there because I know we have, you know.
Lesley, that was amazing. I've actually never heard you talk about a lot of these things. There's so many strategies there that people heard. I mean, just some of the things that I picked up: providing lists of potential women candidates not eligible, funding for women candidates, study circles, inviting male allies, making sure that you have a diverse cross-section audience so people can share perspectives, establishing a roadmap to promote women's participation in electoral processes, developing a women's unit in election management, disaggregating election results by gender. When it's civic education, having women speaking and persons with disabilities speaking, providing gender-sensitive training for journalists, partnering with organizations to develop hotlines on election day so that if you're a woman experiencing violence, you could call the hotline, you would contact the police. Oh my God, there's so much there, Lesley, that I'm going to sit and write an article about all of your strategies later, unless you've written it already, because that's just tremendous. I mean, there's so many strategies there that she's used in two different, completely different cultural contexts that were effective. And frankly, someone working in the US, a lot of women don't run for office in the US because of money, right? And not having enough funding or violence. But frankly, now there's a lot of violence directed against women running for office or women in public office. And that's something that deters them.
And this is social media bullying, you know, for women. Yes. So very true.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for the sake of time, because I could keep going and going and going on this, you were a member of the Women's Leadership Challenge. I think you were in my very first cohort.
Yes, that is correct. I was.
In 2020, which is crazy. What was valuable about the Women's Leadership Challenge for you?
Okay, I can't talk about this class enough. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I highly recommend it for, and, you know, a lot of people, you know, especially, well, I'm in the development sector. So you think, okay, you have to, you know, be in with, you know, all the other workshops I've done are always with people in the development sector. But what was, this is that, I don't know how Samantha was able to do it, but she had a diverse cross-section of women. And this actually speaks to one of what we actually did. So I don't know how I didn't think about it in our gender inclusion. But, you know, there were women who were with Fortune 500 companies and, you know, filmmakers, like she said, and a woman that was in sort of a chemical plant and environmentalist. And what was very good is that you're learning, because even though they're in totally different industries, I learned a lot from, you know, from these women. I learned a lot from them. And then what she had was these, what she called donuts. So every week, I believe it was, or every 2 weeks, she, you know, pinned you with somebody from me, you know, like she thought that either that, okay, you have similarities or, you know, there can be synergy. So it was excellent to create synergy. And I remember one of the first people that she put me with, I'm like, but this person has nothing in, you know, democracy and governance. You know, I mean, totally, you know, left field. What am I going to do? And it was actually for this individual, I learned the most. She said, oh, this is what we're doing. I said, oh, wow. Yes, I mean, I think it's very useful to speak with women from different industries because we all face the same challenge, no matter the industry. And also she had women from various different, from different countries. So I spoke with a woman from Turkey. I spoke with another woman from Spain in these donuts. And then also what I took away from this was that, yes, you've been working at it for, at the time it would have been 10 years, more than 10 years in, so sort of leadership positions. But there was this, she had you thinking differently and providing other paradigms that you would not have thought of. I mean, I'll give you an example. At one point, you had your mother, I think she's a psychologist. And I've always said, if anybody knows me, I said, I don't do the breathing exercise, the yoga, the meditation. It doesn't work for me. My personality, I've never done it. So the mother took us through, Samantha's mother took us through this exercise. And what was funny was, I remember at the end of the exercise, they said, okay, what were you thinking? So I had like a whole day planned. I was at the beach, whatever. And I remember her mother asked, okay, how long do you think this exercise was? So I thought it was like 5 minutes. I said, about 25 minutes. And what happened is that it was only, I think it's only 7 minutes, but I thought it was 25 minutes. So basically what it showed me was, and I remember Samantha saying that your mother said, no, Lesley rarely got there. That I said, my God, there it is. I said that this would never happen to me. And because I had rarely, I'm not into psychology, but whatever, follow the breathing practice and meditation and what to do. I thought it was a 20-minute session when it was only 5 minutes. And I was thinking, how could it have been 25 minutes and the class was only 2 hours? Yeah, so there are a lot of things that, this class helped me to also think outside the box. And, she presented a lot of material, interesting material that, she has, I don't know, a group or she does the research. So a lot of interesting articles that I still access today. So I would highly recommend it.
Thank you so much, Lesley. That means so much to me. What would you say to women who are feeling called to rise up to take the Women's Leadership Challenge, but might be worried about money, time, whatever? What advice would you give them?
No, I would say you find the time. If you want to make change, you've got to find, if anything you want to do, you have to invest in it. You have to invest money, you have to invest time. So I would find the time. And as you know, I will quote, because I said one of my favorite mentors or leaders is Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados. And what she said, that the best leaders not only create their vision, and this is what the class helps you to do, but it also inspires others you also have to inspire others towards action. And this is also what I would, you will get from the class. It would give you strategic vision, but also to help you to inspire others towards action. And I think that's part of being a woman leader.
Thank you so much, Lesley. It means so much to me to hear that from somebody who's so incredible herself. So as I've mentioned, if you don't want to do the Women's Leadership Challenge, I'm so happy to have you here and to give you everything that you need here. But if you're feeling called to have a much longer experience where you get to deconstruct your past and the patriarchy, you do a full 360 review, you learn strategies to advance in the current world, you get inspiration from other women, you inspire other women, you learn feminist leadership principles, you learn strategies to foster change and put them into action. You get your Samantha kicks in the butts to actually do the things that you say you're going to do instead of just saying you're going to do them and never doing them because no one holds you accountable. If you want live executive coaching from an ICF coach, that's the journey. Please book time on my calendar to discuss and would love to hear more about you. Again, it's only for women who are already in leadership positions. And for a lot of you, your companies or your organizations will pay for it because it is a leadership certificate or it is, and it's a leadership program, or they'll pay for at least half of it. So tomorrow we're going to be hearing from Tori Graff, who is going to be doing a workshop on AI. Becoming Superwoman using AI. So thank you so much to everyone for coming. It's so good to see people again. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. If anyone has questions for Lesley, I'm happy to stay on a couple extra minutes to answer questions for Lesley. But in the meantime, thank you and have a wonderful weekend. Hopefully I will see you tomorrow. And my calendar link's in the chat if you want to book a call to talk. Thanks, everybody. All right. Thanks, Marcia. Good to see you.